The bullet that shattered the window of the general store in Holbrook, Arizona, missed Temperance Turner by mere inches. And in that moment, she knew her father's debts had finally caught up with her. It was June 1878, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty Main Street. Temperance pressed herself against the wooden counter, her heart hammering against her ribs as shouts erupted outside. She had been purchasing flour when the chaos began, and now the shopkeeper had disappeared into his back room, leaving her alone with the broken glass and the acrid smell of gunpowder drifting through the air. Her father had died 3 months ago, leaving her with nothing but a run-down house on the edge of town and debts to men she had never met. Marcus Hollis was one of them, a cruel man who owned the saloon and half the gambling establishments between here and Flagstaff. He had come calling twice already, his intentions clear. He wanted payment, and when she told him she had nothing, his eyes had traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Come out, Miss Turner," a voice called from outside. It was Hollis himself. "We just want to talk about your father's obligations." Temperance knew better. She had heard the stories about women who fell into debt to men like him. They disappeared into his saloon and emerged months later, broken and hollow-eyed if they emerged at all. She looked around frantically for another way out, but the back door was visible through the storage room, and she would be spotted immediately if she ran. The front door creaked open. Heavy boots scraped against the wooden floor. Then a different sound cut through the tension, the steady clip-clop of a horse approaching at a measured pace. The footsteps inside the store halted. "You boys looking for trouble?" a new voice asked. It was deep and calm, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas origins. "This is none of your concern, stranger," Hollis replied. "Well, I am making it my concern. I saw you fire that shot through the window. Could have killed someone." Temperance carefully raised her head just enough to peer over the counter. Through the broken window, she could see a man sitting astride a gray horse. He wore a dusty brown hat pulled low, and even from this distance, she could see the sun-weathered lines of his face. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with a strong jaw and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "The girl owes a debt," Hollis said. "We are simply collecting what is owed." By shooting at her, the stranger's hand rested casually on his thigh, but Temperance noticed it was very close to the revolver at his hip. "That does not seem like proper collection practice." There was a long silence. Temperance could see 2 other men with Hollis, both armed, but they seemed uncertain. The stranger had an air about him that suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. "How much does she owe?" the stranger asked. $200, Hollis said. "Her father lost it playing cards." "I will give you 100 right now, and you will consider the debt paid in full. You will also leave this town and not come back." Hollis laughed, but it sounded forced. "And why would I do that?" "Because I am Colt Garrett, and I am giving you the opportunity to walk away with something instead of nothing. Or we can settle this another way, and you will leave with considerably less." The name meant something. Temperance saw Hollis stiffen, and the 2 men with him exchanged glances. She had heard the name before, too, in passing. Colt Garrett was a former lawman turned ranch hand, known for being quick with a gun but quicker to avoid using it if possible. He had a reputation for fairness, which was rare in these parts. $100, Hollis said slowly. "And I keep my claim on the girl." "No claim," Colt said firmly. "The debt is her father's and he is dead. She owes you nothing. $100, and this ends now." Another long silence stretched out. Temperance held her breath. Finally, Hollis nodded curtly. "Fine, but I want the money now." Colt reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small pouch. He tossed it to Hollis, who caught it and quickly counted the coins inside. Satisfied, he gestured to his men and they mounted their horses. "You are making a mistake, Garrett," Holly said. "She is not worth it." "That is not for you to decide. Now ride out before I change my mind about letting you keep that money." Holly spurred his horse, and the three men galloped away in a cloud of dust. Temperance slowly stood up, her legs shaking. Colt dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post before stepping into the store. Up close, he was taller than she had expected, with broad shoulders and hands that looked equally capable of hard work or handling a gun. "Are you hurt, miss?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "No," she managed to say. "Thank you. I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along. I have a fair idea, and it would not have been good." He glanced at the broken window, then back at her. "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" "I have a house on the edge of town, but I do not know if it is safe anymore. Holly's knows where I live." Colt frowned, thinking. "He is not likely to come back tonight, not after taking my money. But he is also not the type to forget a grudge. You need to leave Holbrook. And go where?" Temperance felt tears prick at her eyes. "I have no money, no family. This is all I have." "What do you have in that house?" "Anything valuable. Just some clothes and a few of my mother's things. She died when I was young." "Then pack what you can carry." "I am heading to a ranch about 30 miles north of here. They are always looking for help, and the owner is a fair man. You can work there, earn some money, and be safe from men like Holly's." Temperance stared at him. "Why are you helping me? You do not even know me." Colt met her eyes, and she saw something in them that was hard to name, a kind of weary compassion, perhaps, or simply the instinct of a decent man who had seen too much cruelty. "Because someone should," he said simply. "And because I can. Now, do you want my help or not?" She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Colt waited outside while she went to the shopkeeper, who had finally emerged from his hiding place, and apologized for the broken window. Then she walked quickly to her small house, Colt following at a respectful distance on his horse. The house was just as she had left it that morning, sparse but clean, with her mother's quilt folded on the narrow bed and her father's old boots still sitting by the door. She had not been able to bring herself to throw them out. Now she packed a single bag with her clothes, her mother's silver hairbrush, and a tintype photograph of her parents on their wedding day. It was all she had left of them, and it fit in a small carpet bag. When she emerged, Colt had retrieved a second horse from the livery stable. It was a chestnut mare with gentle eyes. "I borrowed her," he explained. "Or rather, I paid for her. She is yours now if you want her." "I cannot accept that. You have already spent so much money on me. Consider it an investment." "You cannot get to the ranch on foot, and I am not about to make you ride double with me for 30 miles. He paused. "Besides, a woman should have her own horse, gives her options." There was something in the way he said it that made Temperance look at him more closely. He was not doing this out of pity, she realized. He genuinely believed what he was saying. "I do not know how to ride," she admitted. Colt's expression did not change. "Then I will teach you. We have daylight for a few more hours. We can make it to a safe camping spot before dark, and I will give you your first lesson there." Temperance hesitated, then nodded. What choice did she have? Staying in Holbrook meant waiting for Holly's or his men to return, and she had no illusions about what would happen then. At least with this stranger, this Colt Garrett, she had a chance. They left Holbrook as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and pink. Temperance walked beside the mare, her hand on the saddle to steady herself, while Colt rode slowly ahead. He did not rush her, did not complain about the slow pace. He simply led the way, occasionally pointing out landmarks or warning her about uneven ground. They stopped at a small creek surrounded by cottonwood trees just as the last light was fading. Colt dismounted and began setting up a simple camp with the ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times. He built a fire, set water to boil for coffee, and laid out his bedroll before turning his attention to the horses. "Come here," he said to Temperance, gesturing toward the mare. "Let me show you how to unsaddle her properly. She has been carrying that weight all day, and she will appreciate getting it off." Temperance approached nervously. She had been around horses before, but never this close. The mare was large and powerful, and she was acutely aware of how little she knew. Colt showed her how to unbuckle the straps, how to lift the saddle, where to set it. His hands were sure and quick, and he explained each step in a patient voice. When he handed her a brush, he guided her through grooming the mare, showing her the spots where horses like to be brushed and the places to avoid. "A horse will take care of you if you take care of her," he said. "They are not machines, they are partners. You treat them right, and they will carry you through hell if they have to." After the horses were tended, they sat by the fire and ate a simple meal of beans and hardtack that Colt had in his supplies. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it warmed Temperance from the inside out. The night air was cool, and she was grateful for the fire. "Tell me about the ranch," she said after a while, needing to fill the silence. "It is called the Triple Creek Ranch, owned by a man named Samuel Winters. He has about 1,000 acres and runs cattle mostly, some horses. He is getting older and his sons are off doing their own things, so he needs reliable help. I have worked for him on and off for 3 years now. And you think he will hire me, a woman who knows nothing about ranch work? There is always work on a ranch. Cooking, mending, tending the garden, helping with the chickens. And if you want to learn more, I imagine Sam would be happy to teach you. He is not the type to turn away someone willing to work." Temperance looked into the fire, watching the flames dance. "Why did you really help me today, Mr. Garrett?" Colt was quiet for a moment. "Call me Colt. And I helped you because I know what it is like to have nowhere to go. My parents died when I was 15. Cholera took them both within a week of each other. I was left with nothing, and if it had not been for people who were willing to give me a chance, I would not be here now. I figure I owe it to pay that forward when I can. I am sorry about your parents. It was a long time ago." He stood and added another log to the fire. "You should get some sleep. Tomorrow I will give you your first riding lesson, and then we will head to the ranch. It will be a long day." He gave her his bedroll despite her protests, saying he would be fine with his saddle blanket. Temperance lay down near the fire, her carpetbag serving as a pillow, and stared up at the vast expanse of stars overhead. She had lived in Arizona her whole life, but she had never spent a night outside like this. The sky seemed impossibly large, and for the first time in months, she felt something other than fear. It was a strange, tentative feeling, but she thought it might be hope. When she woke the next morning, the sun was just beginning to rise, and Colt already had coffee brewing. He handed her a cup and a piece of dried meat for breakfast, then gestured toward the mare. "Ready for your lesson?" Temperance's stomach fluttered with nerves, but she nodded. Colt showed her how to saddle the mare properly, talking her through each step and having her do it herself under his guidance. Then he adjusted the stirrups to fit her height and turned to her. "Mounting is the first thing you need to learn. Put your left foot in the stirrup, grab the saddle horn and swing your right leg over. The mare will stand still for you. She is well trained." It took Temperance 3 tries to get it right. The first time, she could not get herself high enough. The second time, she got tangled in her skirts. But the third time, she managed to settle into the saddle, breathing hard but triumphant. "Good," Colt said, and she could hear the approval in his voice. "Now hold the reins like this, not too tight. The mare responds to gentle pressure. You do not need to yank on her mouth." She wants to do what you ask, you just have to learn how to ask properly. He spent the next hour teaching her the basics: how to sit, how to hold the reins, how to make the mare walk and stop. Temperance felt clumsy and uncertain at first, but Colt was endlessly patient. When she started to get frustrated, he would make a joke or point out something she was doing right, and she would find herself relaxing. "You are a natural," he said finally. "I have seen people take days to get comfortable in the saddle. You are already doing fine." "I do not feel like I am doing fine. I feel like I am about to fall off at any moment." "That is normal. But look at you, you are sitting straight, your hands are steady, and the mare is responding to you. That is all you need for now." They broke camp and set off, moving at a slow walk. Colt rode beside her, occasionally offering advice or encouragement. As the morning wore on, Temperance found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the mare's gait. It was not as terrifying as she had expected. In fact, there was something almost soothing about it. Around midday, they stopped to rest and water the horses at another creek. Colt disappeared into the brush and returned a few minutes later with a rabbit he had snared. He cleaned and cooked it over a small fire, and they ate sitting on flat rocks beside the water. "Can I ask you something?" Temperance said. "Go ahead." "Why did you stop being a lawman?" Colt's expression darkened slightly. "I stopped because I got tired of enforcing laws that only protected some people and not others. I got tired of watching men with money get away with murder while poor folks got hanged for stealing a loaf of bread. It did not sit right with me." "So you just quit?" "I quit after I was ordered to evict a family from their land because they could not pay their taxes. The father had died and the mother was trying to raise 4 kids on her own. She was doing her best, but it was not enough. I was supposed to throw them out in the middle of winter." He paused, his jaw tight. "I could not do it. I paid their taxes myself and turned in my badge the next day." Temperance felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the sun. "That was a good thing you did." "Maybe. Or maybe I was just a coward who could not do his job." "No," she said firmly. "You were brave. It takes more courage to stand up for what is right than to blindly follow orders." Colt looked at her, and for the first time she saw him really smile. It changed his whole face, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. "Thank you for saying that." They rode through the afternoon, and Colt continued to coach her. By the time they stopped for the evening, Temperance's legs were sore and her back ached, but she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had ridden for hours without falling off, and the mare seemed to trust her. As Colt set up camp, Temperance helped as much as she could, carrying water from a nearby stream and gathering firewood. She was determined not to be a burden. When the fire was going and dinner was cooking, Colt turned to her. "You did well today. Really well. How do you feel?" "Sore," she admitted, "but good. I never thought I would be able to do something like this." "You can do more than you think," he said. "Most people can. They just need someone to give them a chance." After dinner, they sat by the fire again, and Temperance found herself talking more than she had in months. She told Colt about her childhood, about her mother's death from pneumonia when she was 8, about her father's slow descent into gambling and drinking after that. She told him about the loneliness of growing up in a house where love had been replaced by grief, and the fear of watching her father waste away until there was nothing left but debts and regrets. Colt listened without interrupting, his eyes on the fire. When she finally fell silent, he spoke. "You deserved better than that. Maybe, but it is what I got. Not anymore," he said, turning to look at her. "You are starting fresh now. The past is behind you. You get to decide what comes next." Temperance felt tears well up, but she blinked them back. "I do not even know where to start." "You start by learning to ride. You start by working hard and earning your keep. You start by believing that you deserve a good life, because you do," He paused. And you start by not letting anyone take your freedom once you have it. His words settled into her heart like seeds planted in fertile soil. She nodded slowly. I will try. That is all anyone can do. They reached the Triple Creek Ranch late the next afternoon. It was larger than Temperance had imagined, with a sprawling main house, several outbuildings, and endless stretches of fenced pasture where cattle grazed. The ranch was nestled in a valley with low hills rising on either side, and a creek ran through the property, glinting silver in the sunlight. Samuel Winters came out to greet them, a tall man in his 60s with gray hair and a weathered face. He shook Colt's hand warmly, then turned to Temperance with a curious but kind expression. This is Temperance Turner, Colt said. She is looking for work. I can vouch for her character, and I believe she would be a good addition to the ranch. Samuel studied her for a moment, then nodded. Any friend of Colt's is welcome here. Can you cook, Miss Turner? Yes, sir. My mother taught me. Good. My housekeeper, Mrs. Callahan, could use the help. She is not as young as she used to be, and the work is getting to be too much for her. You will have room and board plus $30 a month. Does that sound fair? $30 was more than Temperance had dared to hope for. Yes, sir, thank you. No need for thanks. You will earn your keep. He gestured toward the main house. Go on inside and find Mrs. Callahan. She will get you settled. Temperance glanced at Colt, who gave her an encouraging nod. She dismounted carefully, her legs protesting, and led the mare toward the barn. A young ranch hand took the reins from her with a friendly smile and promised to take good care of the horse. Then she made her way to the main house, her carpetbag clutched in her hand. Mrs. Callahan turned out to be a stout Irish woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, but her gruffness was undercut by a fundamental kindness. She showed Temperance to a small but clean room off the kitchen, helped her unpack, and immediately put her to work peeling potatoes for dinner. As Temperance worked, she could hear the sounds of the ranch outside, men calling to each other, horses whinnying, the lowing of cattle. It was a world away from the dusty quiet of Holbrook, and she felt both overwhelmed and strangely at peace. Over the next few weeks, Temperance settled into a routine. She woke before dawn to help Mrs. Callahan prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, spent the morning cleaning and mending, and devoted her afternoons to whatever tasks needed doing. She learned to bake bread, to churn butter, to preserve vegetables from the garden. Mrs. Callahan was a demanding teacher, but she was also generous with praise when Temperance did well. In the evenings, after dinner was served and the dishes were done, Colt would often find her and take her out to practice riding. He was patient and encouraging, teaching her how to trot, how to guide the mare with her knees, how to read the animal's moods. Temperance found herself looking forward to these lessons more than anything else in her day. One evening, about a month after her arrival, Colt took her out to a large pasture and told her to try cantering. Temperance was nervous. She had only just gotten comfortable with trotting, but Colt assured her she was ready. Just relax and move with the horse, he said. Trust her. She knows what she is doing. Temperance took a deep breath and gave the mare a gentle kick. The horse surged forward, and for a moment, Temperance felt like she was going to fly right off. But then she found the rhythm, leaning forward slightly, her body moving in sync with the mare's powerful strides. The wind whipped her hair back and the ground blurred beneath her. She felt wild and free in a way she had never experienced before. When she finally pulled the mare to a stop, she was laughing, her face flushed with exhilaration. Colt rode up beside her, and she saw pride in his eyes. Freedom looks good on you, he said quietly. Do not ever let anyone take it. Temperance met his gaze, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that went deeper than words. I will not, she promised. Thank you for giving it to me." Colt looked like he wanted to say something else, but he just nodded and turned his horse back toward the barn. Temperance followed, her heart still racing, not just from the ride. She had been at the ranch for 2 months when she realized she was falling in love with him. It crept up on her slowly, in small moments. The way he always made sure she had enough to eat at dinner, the way he patiently answered her questions about horses and cattle, the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention. He was kind without being condescending, strong without being overbearing. He treated her like an equal, and that was something she had never experienced with a man before. But she had no idea if he felt the same way. He was always friendly, always helpful, but he maintained a certain distance that she could not quite cross. She told herself it did not matter, that she should be grateful for everything he had already done for her, but her heart had other ideas. The situation came to a head one evening in late September. Temperance had been helping with the cattle roundup, bringing water and food to the men working in the far pastures. It was hard, dusty work, but she did not mind. She liked being outside, liked feeling useful in a tangible way. She was heading back to the ranch house when she heard shouting. A group of riders was approaching fast, and even from a distance, she could see they were not friendly. Her heart lurched as she recognized the man in front, Marcus Hollis. Temperance ran toward the barn where she knew Colt and several other ranch hands were working. She burst through the door, breathless. "Hollis is here," she gasped. "He has men with him." Colt's expression hardened. He grabbed his rifle from where it hung on the wall and strode outside. Temperance followed, her stomach churning with fear. Hollis and his men had stopped in front of the main house. Samuel Winters stood on the porch, his own rifle in hand, his face like stone. "What do you want, Hollis?" Samuel called out. "I want what is mine," Hollis replied. "You have a woman here who owes me money I have come to collect." "She owes you nothing," Colt said, stepping forward. "We settled that debt months ago. You took my money and agreed to leave her alone." "I changed my mind. That money was not enough. She still owes me." "That is not how it works, and you know it," Colt said, his voice steady but dangerous. "You made a deal. You do not get to come back and change the terms. I do what I want." Hollis leaned forward in his saddle. "Now, are you going to hand her over, or do we have a problem?" "We have a problem," Samuel said from the porch. "This is my land and you are trespassing. You have 10 seconds to turn around and leave before my men open fire." As if on cue, ranch hands emerged from the barn, the bunkhouse, and around the side of the house. They were all armed and they all looked ready to fight. Hollis glanced around, clearly doing the math in his head. "This is not over," he said finally. "The girl is going to regret hiding behind you people. The only thing she is going to regret is wasting time worrying about a coward like you," Colt said. "Now get off this property before I make you regret coming here." Hollis stared at him for a long moment, then spat in the dirt and turned his horse. His men followed and they rode off in a cloud of dust. The tension drained from the air, but Temperance found herself shaking. Colt turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" "I am sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I did not mean to bring trouble here." "I should leave before. You are not going anywhere," Samuel interrupted. "Hollis is a bully and a cheat. He does not scare me and he should not scare you. You are part of this ranch now and we take care of our own." Colt placed a hand on her shoulder. "He is right. You are safe here. I will not let anything happen to you." Temperance looked up at him and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Why do you care so much?" "Because you matter," he said simply. "You matter to me." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with her heart pounding and 1,000 questions swirling in her mind. That night, Temperance could not sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Colt's words over and over. "You matter to me." What did that mean? Was it just the concern of a friend, or was it something more? Finally, she could not stand it any longer. She pulled on her shawl and slipped out of the house. The night was cool and clear, the stars bright overhead. She walked toward the barn, drawn by a light she could see through the cracks in the door. Inside, she found Colt sitting on a hay bale mending a bridle. He looked up in surprise when she entered. "Temperance, what are you doing out here?" "I could not sleep," she said. "I needed to talk to you." He set the bridle aside. "Is something wrong?" "I need to know what you meant earlier, when you said I matter to you." Colt was silent for a long moment. Then he stood and crossed to stand in front of her. In the dim light of the lantern, his face was half in shadow, but she could see the conflict in his eyes. "I meant exactly what I said. You matter to me. More than you should, probably." "What does that mean?" "It means I care about you in a way I have no business caring. It means I think about you all the time. It means when I saw Holly's today, I wanted to put a bullet in him for daring to threaten you." He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "It means I am falling in love with you, and I do not know what to do about it." Temperance's heart soared. "You are." "Yes, but you deserve better than a man like me. You deserve someone with money and prospects, someone who can give you a real home, a real future. I have nothing to offer you but hard work and uncertainty." She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "You gave me my freedom. You gave me a chance at a new life. You taught me to ride and to believe in myself. How can you say you have nothing to offer?" "Temperance, I am falling in love with you too," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I have been for weeks. I tried not to because I thought you would never feel the same way, but I cannot help it. When I am with you, I feel safe. I feel like I can be myself. I feel like I can do anything." Colt reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands. His touch was warm and calloused, the hands of a working man, and she leaned into it. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Because once I kiss you, I am not going to want to stop. I am not going to want to let you go." "Then do not let me go," she whispered. "I do not want you to." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like she had imagined a first kiss would be. It was fierce and tender all at once, full of all the longing and fear and hope they had both been holding back. She wrapped her arms around his neck and he pulled her close, and for a moment the rest of the world disappeared. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Colt rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I know it is fast, but I do. I love you, Temperance." "I love you too," she said, and it felt like the truest thing she had ever said. They stood there in the barn, holding each other, until the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky. Then Colt walked her back to the house, kissed her one more time at the door, and made her promise to get some sleep. The next few months were the happiest of Temperance's life. She and Colt made their relationship known to the rest of the ranch, and if anyone disapproved, they kept it to themselves. Samuel seemed particularly pleased, telling Colt that it was about time he found a good woman. They continued their riding lessons, though now they often rode out together just for the pleasure of it. Colt showed her the far corners of the ranch, places where wildflowers grew in riotous profusion, where eagles nested in the cliffs, where the creek widened into deep pools perfect for swimming on hot days. One evening in December, Colt took her to a hilltop that overlooked the entire valley. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and the ranch below looked peaceful and prosperous. "I want to ask you something," Colt said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. Temperance turned to him, her heart beginning to race. "What is it?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. When he opened it, she saw a simple silver ring set with a small turquoise stone. "It is not much," he said, But it was my mother's, and it is the most valuable thing I own. I want you to have it. I want you to marry me, Temperance. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Tears sprang to her eyes. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, and she felt like she was flying again, like that first time she had cantered across the pasture with the wind in her hair and the whole world spread out before her. They were married in February of 1879, in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Mrs. Callahan cried openly. Samuel gave Temperance away, and all the ranch hands attended, scrubbed clean and dressed in their best. Temperance wore a dress that Mrs. Callahan had helped her sew, pale blue with white lace at the collar and cuffs. She had never felt more beautiful. Colt looked at her like she was the only person in the world, and when they said their vows, his voice was strong and sure. She promised to love him, to stand by him, to build a life with him, and she meant every word. Samuel gave them a small house on the edge of the ranch property as a wedding present. It was just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was theirs. They spent their first night as husband and wife there, lying in each other's arms, talking about the future. "I want children," Temperance said. "Someday. When we are ready." "So do I," Colt said. "As many as you want. And I want to keep riding. I do not want to give that up." "I would never ask you to. You are too good at it now." He kissed her forehead. "Besides, I meant what I said that first time. Freedom looks good on you." She smiled against his chest. "You gave me that freedom. You gave me everything." "No," he said. "You gave it to yourself. I just helped you see it was possible." Life settled into a new rhythm. Temperance continued to work at the main house, but she also began helping Colt with some of his ranch duties. She learned to rope cattle, to brand calves, to mend fences. She was not as strong as the men, but she was quick and determined, and she earned their respect. In the spring, Hollis tried one more time to make trouble. He rode onto the ranch with a group of men demanding to see Temperance. But this time, Colt was ready. He met Hollis at the property line, backed by a dozen armed ranch hands. "Turn around," Colt said, his hand on his gun. "You have no business here. The woman is my wife, and if you so much as look at her wrong, I will kill you. That is not a threat, Hollis. That is a promise." Something in Colt's eyes must have convinced him. Hollis paled, turned his horse, and rode away. They never saw him again. Word eventually reached the ranch that he had lost his saloon in a card game and left Arizona for good. Temperance found out she was pregnant in August. She told Colt one evening as they sat on the porch of their little house, watching the sun set. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. "I am sure. Mrs. Callahan says I am about 2 months along." Colt pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "We are going to have a baby," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "We are," she said. "Are you happy?" "I am more than happy. I am the luckiest man alive." Their son was born in March of 1880, a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him James, after Colt's father. Temperance had never known love like the love she felt for that tiny, helpless creature. It was fierce and overwhelming, and it made her understand her own mother in a way she never had before. Colt was a devoted father. He would spend hours holding James, talking to him in a low voice, showing him the ranch and the animals. Temperance would watch them together and feel her heart swell with gratitude for the life they had built. When James was 2, Temperance gave birth to a daughter. They named her Grace, and she had Colt's gray eyes and Temperance's stubborn chin. She was a wild, fearless child who wanted to do everything her big brother did, and Temperance had to watch her constantly to keep her out of trouble. As the children grew, Colt taught them to ride, just as he had taught Temperance. James took to it naturally, but it was Grace who really shone. By the time she was 5, she could ride as well as any of the ranch hands, and she had no fear whatsoever. "She is just like her mother," Colt said one day, watching Grace gallop across a field with her hair flying behind her. "God help us," Temperance said, but she was smiling. Samuel passed away in the spring of 1885, leaving the ranch to his oldest son, who had returned from back east. But Colt had saved enough money over the years to buy a small piece of land adjacent to the Triple Creek Ranch, and he started his own cattle operation. It was modest, but it was theirs. Temperance worked alongside him, and together they built something they could be proud of. They called it the Garrett Ranch, and over the years it grew and prospered. They hired a few hands, built a larger house, added more cattle. It was hard work, but it was good work. Their third child, another son named Samuel after Colt's friend, was born in 1886. He was quieter than his siblings, more thoughtful, but no less loved. Temperance sometimes looked at her 3 children and marveled at how different they all were, how they each had their own personalities and dreams. One evening, when the children were asleep and she and Colt sat on the porch of their home, she turned to him. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Helping me that day in Hallbrook. Your life would have been simpler without me." Colt looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Regret it? Temperance, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children are everything to me. How could I possibly regret that?" "I was just wondering," she said softly. He pulled her close. "Listen to me. That day in Hallbrook was the day my life really began. Everything before that was just existing. You taught me what it means to really live, to really love. I would do it all again 1,000 times over." She kissed him, tasting the truth in his words. "I love you. I love you too. Always." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. James grew into a serious young man who loved working with cattle and dreamed of expanding the ranch even further. Grace remained wild and free, the best rider in the county, and she eventually became the first woman to compete in the local rodeo, much to the shock of the more traditional folks. Samuel became a schoolteacher, using his love of books and learning to help other children. Temperance and Colt grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had their fights. Of course, no marriage was perfect, but they always worked through them. They had learned early on that communication and respect were the foundations of a good relationship, and they never forgot it. In 1895, when Temperance was 40 years old and Colt was 42, they stood on the same hilltop where he had proposed to her all those years ago. Their children were grown now, making their own way in the world. The ranch was successful and stable. They had built a good life. "You remember the first time I brought you here?" Colt asked. "How could I forget? You gave me this ring and asked me to marry you." He took her hand, running his thumb over the silver band she still wore. "I also told you that you deserved better than me, and I told you that you were wrong. You were right." He pulled her close. "I have spent every day since then trying to be worthy of you." "You were always worthy," she said. "From the moment you stood up to Hollies in Hallbrook, you were worthy. You are a good man, Colt Garrett. Only because I have a good woman by my side." They stood there, watching the sun set over their land, over the life they had built together. Temperance thought back to that frightened girl in the general store, the one who had thought her life was over. She had been so wrong. Her life had not ended that day. It had begun. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For teaching me to ride, for giving me freedom, for loving me." Colt smiled, the same smile that had won her heart all those years ago. "Freedom looks good on you," he said. "It always has." "I will never let anyone take it," she promised, "just like you told me. That is my girl." They walked back down the hill together, hand in hand, as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. They had weathered storms and droughts, market crashes and personal losses. They had raised 3 children, built a ranch from nothing, and created a legacy that would outlast them both. But more than that, they had loved each other, deeply, truly, completely. And in the end, that was what mattered most. James eventually took over the ranch, running it with the same dedication his father had. He married a kind woman named Elizabeth, and they gave Temperance and Colt 5 grandchildren. Grace never married, choosing instead to travel the West competing in rodeos and breaking horses. She was happy in her independence, and Temperance was proud of her for it. Samuel taught at the schoolhouse in Holbrook for 30 years, shaping young minds and instilling in them a love of learning. Temperance and Colt grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down, but their love never fading. They spent their final years sitting on that porch, watching their grandchildren play, telling stories about the old days, and holding hands like newlyweds. Colt passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1910, at the age of 57. Temperance held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering that she loved him, that she would see him again. The pain of losing him was almost unbearable, but she took comfort in knowing that they had had 31 wonderful years together. She lived for another 8 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She spent her days tending her garden, riding her beloved mare, the great-great-granddaughter of the one Colt had bought her in Holbrook, and sharing stories about their father with her children. On her deathbed at the age of 63, Temperance gathered her family around her. James, Grace, and Samuel stood by her side, along with their children and grandchildren. "I want you all to remember something," she said, her voice weak but clear. "Your father gave me the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. He taught me that I was capable of more than I ever imagined. He taught me to be free. I want you to do the same for others. Help people see their own strength. Give them the tools they need to build good lives. That is how you honor his memory. That is how you honor me." They all promised they would, tears streaming down their faces. Grace held her hand tightly. "We love you, Mama." "I love you all too," Temperance said. "So very much. And I love your father. Tell him I am coming home when you see him." She closed her eyes with a smile on her face and slipped away quietly, peacefully. Her children buried her next to Colt on the hill overlooking the ranch, the same hill where he had proposed. They marked the graves with a simple headstone that read, "Colt and Temperance Garrett, together forever." The ranch continued to thrive for generations. The Garrett name became synonymous with hard work, integrity, and compassion. People would tell stories about Colt, the cowboy who stood up to bullies and taught a frightened woman to ride. They would tell stories about Temperance, who went from having nothing to building an empire of her own. But the most important story, the one that mattered most, was the story of their love. A love that had started with an act of kindness, that had grown through patience and respect, and that had lasted a lifetime. It was the kind of love that inspired songs and poems, the kind that gave people hope. In Holbrook, the old general store still stood, though it had been renovated many times over the years. Sometimes, on quiet afternoons, people would swear they could hear the sound of hoofbeats, the ghost of a young woman riding off to freedom, following a cowboy who believed in her when no one else did. And in those moments, if you listened closely enough, you could almost hear the words carried on the wind. "Freedom looks good on you. Do not ever let anyone take it." Those words became the motto of the Garrett family, passed down through the generations. They were words to live by, words that reminded each new generation of where they came from and who they were meant to be. Years after Temperance's death, Grace, now an old woman herself, stood on that same hilltop with her nieces and nephews. She pointed to the graves of her parents and told them the story one more time. How Colt had saved Temperance, how he had taught her to ride, how they had fallen in love and built a life together. "Your grandfather once told me that he saw something in your grandmother that day in Holbrook," Grace said. "He saw strength and courage, even though she could not see it herself. He gave her the tools to access that strength, and she did the rest. That is true love, seeing the best in someone and helping them see it too." The children nodded solemnly, taking in every word. They had heard this story dozens of times, but they never tired of it. It was their family history, their legacy. Grace looked out over the ranch, over the land her parents had built with their own hands and their own sweat. The sun was setting, just as it had been that evening so many years ago when Colt had proposed. The sky was the same gold and crimson, the valley spread out below in the same timeless beauty. "Remember this," Grace said to the children. "Remember that love is not just about feelings. It is about action. It is about standing up for someone when they cannot stand up for themselves. It is about teaching them to fly and then letting them soar. That is what your grandparents had, and that is what I hope you will all find someday." She paused, then smiled. "And remember that freedom is the most precious gift you can give or receive. Do not ever let anyone take it from you, and do not ever try to take it from someone else. Freedom looks good on everyone." The children chorused their understanding, and Grace felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. She had kept her promise to her mother. She had shared the story, kept the legacy alive. Now it was up to the next generation to carry it forward. As they walked back down the hill together, the children chattering and laughing, Grace looked back one last time at the graves of her parents. The setting sun cast long shadows across the headstone, and for just a moment, she could have sworn she saw two figures standing there, a man in a brown hat and a woman with wind-blown hair, holding hands and looking out over the land they loved. She blinked, and they were gone. But she knew, deep in her heart, that they were still there. They would always be there, watching over the ranch, watching over the family they had created, their love as eternal as the desert sky. Grace smiled and turned away, following her family down the hill. The story was not over. It never really ended. It lived on in every child who learned to ride, in every act of kindness, in every person who stood up for what was right. It lived on in the land itself, in the wind that whispered through the valleys, in the spirit of freedom that could never be broken. And somewhere, in a place beyond time and space, Colt and Temperance Garrett rode together across endless prairies, young again and free, their love the only thing more vast than the western sky. That was the true ending of their story. Not death, but eternity. Not an ending at all, but a beginning that would never cease. They had found each other in this life, and they would remain together in whatever came next. And for everyone who heard their story, who learned from their example, who chose courage over fear and love over hate, that was the greatest gift they could have left behind. The story of Colt and Temperance Garrett became a legend in Arizona, a tale passed down through countless families, a reminder of what was possible when two people truly loved each other. It inspired young women to seek their own freedom, to build their own lives. It inspired young men to be kind and respectful, to see strength in others and help them realize it. The ranch itself stood for over 100 years, a testament to what they had built. Eventually, it was absorbed into a larger operation, but the name remained Garrett Ranch, and everyone who worked there knew the story. It was part of the land itself, woven into every fence post and every blade of grass. In Holbrook, a small museum opened that celebrated the history of the area. In one corner, there was an exhibit dedicated to Colt and Temperance. It featured the silver ring with the turquoise stone, carefully preserved and displayed. It featured photographs of the ranch, of their children and grandchildren. It featured a worn saddle that had once belonged to Temperance, the leather cracked with age but still sturdy. And in the center of the exhibit, etched in brass on a plaque, were the words that had changed a life and built a legacy. Freedom looks good on you. Do not ever let anyone take it. Visitors would stop and read those words, and something would shift inside them. They would leave the museum with straighter spines, with determination in their eyes, with the knowledge that they too could choose freedom, could choose to live boldly and love deeply. That was the final chapter of the story, written not on paper but in the hearts of everyone who heard it. Colt and Temperance Garrett had lived, loved, and died, but their impact rippled outward through time, touching lives they would never know, inspiring people they would never meet. And in the end, is that not what every great love story does? It reminds us of what is possible. It shows us that kindness matters, that courage can be taught, that freedom is both a gift and a choice. It proves that two people starting with nothing can build something that lasts forever. The Wild West was a hard place, full of danger and uncertainty. But it was also a place where people could reinvent themselves, where the past did not have to define the future, where a cowboy could teach a woman to ride and change both their lives forever. That was the true magic of that time and place, the possibility of transformation, the chance to become more than you were. Colt saw that possibility in Temperance, and he helped her see it in herself. And in doing so, they created something beautiful and lasting. Their story was complete, every thread tied off, every question answered. They had lived, loved, raised a family, built a legacy, and left the world better than they found it. They had kept their promises to each other and to themselves. And when the last member of the Garrett family who had known them personally passed away in 1962, at the age of 93, his final words were about his grandparents, the legendary Colt and Temperance. They loved each other, he whispered to his own grandchildren, gathered around his bedside. Really loved each other, not just in the good times but in the hard times too. That is what made them special. That is what made them great. And with those words the story came full circle. From that day in Holbrook in 1878, when a cowboy saw a woman in danger and chose to help, to this moment over 80 years later, when the last living memory of them faded into history, it was all one continuous thread of love. The Garrett ranch land was eventually sold to developers, the old house torn down to make way for new construction. But before it was demolished, the family gathered one last time. They salvaged what they could: photographs, letters, small mementos. Grace's daughter, now elderly herself, took the worn bridle that Colt had been mending that night when Temperance had come to him in the barn and confessed her love. "This stays in the family," she said firmly. "This is where it really began." And she was right. That bridle, that barn, that moment when two people admitted what their hearts had known all along, that was the fulcrum on which everything else had balanced. The story of Colt and Temperance Garrett was complete. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. But like all truly great love stories, it also had an eternal quality, a timelessness that meant it would be told and retold for generations. In the modern world, where Holbrook had grown from a dusty frontier town into a thriving community, people still talked about them. Schoolchildren learned their names in history class. Local historians wrote papers about the ranch and its impact on the region's economy. Romance writers penned fictionalized versions of their story, always trying to capture that indefinable magic. But the truth was simpler and more profound than any fiction could convey. Two people had met in extraordinary circumstances. They had recognized something valuable in each other. They had chosen to build a life together based on respect, trust, and genuine affection. And they had succeeded beyond all measure. That was the real story. That was the legacy. That was what mattered. Freedom looks good on you. Do not ever let anyone take it. Those words, spoken by a young cowboy to a frightened woman, had become a rallying cry, a promise, a way of life. They represented everything good about the human spirit, the ability to change, to grow, to help others do the same. And in the end, that was what Colt and Temperance Garrett had given to the world. Not just a successful ranch or a large family, but an example of what love could be when it was done right. An example of courage and kindness, of strength tempered with gentleness, of freedom earned and protected. Their story was finished, complete in every way. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left a legacy that would never fade. What more could anyone ask from a life, from a love, from a story? In the vast expanse of the Arizona desert, where the sky stretches forever and the land remembers everything, the spirit of Colt and Temperance Garrett lives on. In every sunset over the valley, in every wild horse running free, in every act of kindness between strangers, they are there. And that, finally and forever, is how their story ends, not with death, but with love eternal, freedom unshakable, and a legacy that will never die. The cowboy and the woman he taught to ride, together always, free forever, their love a beacon for all who come after. It was a story worthy of the Wild West, a tale of transformation and triumph, of two souls finding each other against all odds. It was a story of hope and healing, of second chances and new beginnings. It was, in every sense, a perfect love story, and it had reached its perfect conclusion. All questions were answered. All conflicts were resolved. All characters had lived their lives and found their peace. The story of Colt and Temperance Garrett was complete, closed, finished. A happily ever after that had been earned through courage, commitment, and an unshakable belief in each other. And so, as the sun sets one final time on this tale, we leave them there in memory, in legend, in the eternal landscape of the American West. A cowboy and his wife who taught each other about love and freedom, and who proved that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with a simple act of kindness. The end had come, full circle and complete, leaving nothing untold, nothing unresolved. Their love story, born in danger and forged in trust, had bloomed into something that transcended their own lives, touching everyone who heard it. And in that way, though their bodies had returned to the earth they had worked and loved, Colt and Temperance Garrett would live forever. Freedom looks good on you. Do not ever let anyone take it. Those words were the beginning, the middle, and the end. They were the whole story, distilled into one perfect moment, one perfect truth. And they would echo through the generations, a reminder of what two people had shared and what they had given to the world. This was the complete and total conclusion of their story, with every thread tied off, every promise kept, every dream fulfilled. Colt and Temperance Garrett had lived a great love, and now their story was told in full, from first meeting to final farewell, complete and perfect in every way.